Tambi. Our small and medium enterprise sector in Sri Lanka accounts for more than 50% of the national economy. But it's been in crisis from the times of COVID through the economic meltdown, and it still continues to be in a bad way. And one of the issues it is dealing with is the Parate execution law, which is much in the news these days. And to discuss this and many other matters, I have with me a very special guest. He is Delvin Pereira, who is a banker with 37 years experience, and he was recently appointed district governor Rotary of Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Welcome, Delvin.
Hi, Naresh.
Right. So, Delvin, first of all, congratulations on your appointment as district governor. And it is especially pertinent because Rotary is trying to help out the SME sector. So there is a recognition that the SMEs are in trouble, that they need help, and at the same time, of course, the point of view of the banks has to be balanced. So we really need a national conversation on this and more support all around. But first of all, just to give our viewers some background on what the situation is with the SME sector and the Parate Law, could you do a little explaining on that point?
Yeah, thank you, Dinesh. And first of all, thanks for inviting me for this program, which I'm very happy to share my views. So, getting to the topic of the SME, let me just explain how Rotary has come into looking into SME as a part of their focus, because when you say Rotary, it's always associated with more to do with projects like disease prevention or supporting charity or that type of projects. So you see, Rotary has 7 focused areas, out of which one of the focused areas is the community and economic development, under which most countries use that to support their economies or support SMEs. So Sri Lanka's SME sector, if you see, it has been in some trouble for quite a number of years. Even in the run-up to the COVID or the economic crisis we underwent. Even before that, the topic of SME and the troubles that SME was facing was something that was building up. But come COVID, and then come the economic crisis of the country, that really put a huge adverse impact on the whole economy of the SME, because that's a segment that is contributing for almost, I would say, more than 50% of the GDP and also the employment in the country. Naturally, that's a segment that is very, very important for the country. And from a Rotary aspect, we thought, yes, this is a need of the hour, and we should be focusing on how we support the SME. So having said that, well, supporting SME has many aspects, because one is that we are coming through, or we are trying to recover from an economic crisis, and naturally coming out of that, there is a lot of government policy taken. We have external debt to service, so there is the taxation matter coming in, then the escalation of costs, the exchange rate going up, the scarcity of raw materials, and so many aspects, and of course the drop in consumer demand. So all these have had a very, very strong adverse impact on the SME, and it has become a very complex problem, not just as simple as discussing of, structuring your bank loans or, getting relief. It's a problem that goes beyond that, where all these SME sector business needs a lot of capacity building, a lot of planning, a lot of support in developing markets. So it's a fairly complex area, and why we thought Rotary we could do something here is because Rotary, as you know, it's an organization of professionals and business leaders, and I would say they see a 360-degree angle of this whole SME problem. Some of them are part of it. So why Rotary can get involved is because Rotary is again an influential community. They have the connections internationally as well as locally. They have the ability to build up partnerships. So they have the ability to bring some sort of togetherness of these partnerships in addressing an issue rather than just one angle of maybe the bank or maybe some other support institution. So that's where we see that the Rotary has a strength in extending some support to help the SME sector recover.
Now, when you say some support, you're talking about a nationwide program, or is it in several regions of the country?
It's a nationwide because you see, Rotary is geographically demarcated into districts. So Sri Lanka and Maldives come in as one district, and naturally we will be looking at issues of Sri Lanka as well as Maldives. Right now, when we come to the economic development or community economic development, particularly SME, I mean, the focus is very much on Sri Lanka. Maybe Maldives may be having their own issues, but Maldives again has been somewhat doing better in that angle. Their problem would not be as severe as what we are facing in Sri Lanka. So that's why when we say SME in Sri Lanka, it's a national program. We are looking at, again, I need to make a correction. When I say SME, I'm also saying I'm including the micro segment. And
right.
Yes. So in Sri Lanka, when you say SME, there are various definitions. Like if you go by the ADB, scope, they would look at any business that is going up to 1 billion turnover as an SME. So when you say the SME, that's quite a big business. Whereas micro would come to a much of a smaller scale. So in Rotary, what we have decided, we look at the low end because maybe there are different programs coming into support. There are national programs, but where we feel that we could get involved or help as a starting point would be the low end SMEs, maybe 150 million to 200 million turnover SMEs. But doesn't mean that we are losing focus on the other. That will be our main focus, but wherever we can get involved in the other segment, we want to get involved. So our initial step would be, of course, bringing in partnerships or getting into partnerships and looking at certain sectors of the SME and identifying needs and addressing those needs in building up capacity. That would be the starting point. Of course, out of that, we would be identifying certain SME enterprises, individual enterprises that we think we could get involved in making some difference in getting them to come out of the problem or maybe even develop their business, maybe to help them to develop markets, augment capital, because we also have a base of entrepreneurs in Rotary itself. We have a separate focus within Rotary to help our Rotarians to to get together and do their support each other in their business known as Rotary for Business. So we already have identified it as a requirement within Rotary as well as within the community.
So this is a lot of priceless expertise, which is going out to the provinces.
Exactly.
Because you're talking about the cream of the business community in Sri Lanka, who are going to be directly assisting and giving their expertise and that kind of knowledge, to a micro entrepreneur, in Monaragala or wherever, who doesn't have access to that kind of knowledge. This is quite priceless, isn't it?
Definitely, because you see, if you do some research, you'll understand that there are so many institutions, organizations, state-based NGOs, as well as financial schemes that are available. But the biggest question is how is this segment of micro or this segment of low-end SMEs, how are they getting to know about it? Unless they go to the bank and somebody gives them knowledge, unless they go to a particular say the Chamber of Commerce or they go, but then whether they're getting integrated knowledge is a question. So here what we are looking at is to identify these organizations and build up partnerships. Like for example, we have already built up partnerships with Women in Management, with the Chamber of Exports, then with the various chambers of commerce, so that we get together and talk, discuss, identify needs on how we could do some capacity building in different areas, identifying different business segments. So that way, certainly there would be a huge benefit that goes into the into this troubled SME community.
Right, and to give a bit more context, the SME sector accounts for more than 50% of the
Obviously.
economy. So it is vital at a time when the country is struggling to recover. We're doing fairly well now in terms of GDP growth. Inflation is now under control. The exchange rate is stable and all that, but it's still a far cry from
Yes.
where we need to be as a nation, as an economy. So we can't afford any shocks to
Obviously.
any sector, not to the tourism sector, not to industry, not to services, and not to the SME sector, because any shock to any sector is going to cause a serious problem.
Seriously.
Right. Now, one of the issues, there are many issues which are not just common to SMEs, but common to industries and services and so on. For example, the price of electricity, the price of fuel, labor laws. There are so many issues which need to be addressed by the government, and hopefully things will move along. But one of the immediate issues seems to be this Parate execution law. Could you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes. Well, just to give you a background, of course, we all know that the Parate law came in. Earlier, it was a law that was applicable only to the state banks, but later on, it came in to protect the banking sector in general because of the amount of delays that was taking place in enforcing the law to recover, loans through the sale of properties. For all that, the Parate came in as a some sort of a protection. But having said that, it should be also noted, since I have been in the banking industry, that Parate is used as the last resort for a bank. That is, it comes to a point where, okay, there is nothing else that can be done here. I mean, there is no restructuring can be done. So banks also extend to their maximum before they decide that, well, there is a case here. And to execute Parate means you basically are exercising your right to auction the property and recover your dues. Now, this cannot be, it doesn't operationalize during in your normal banking course of business. It requires to go to the board of directors, and when a matter is escalated to the board of directors, it has to be the ultimate, and the board of directors have a responsibility to make sure that, there is no other course of action for us to recover this. And it is at that point that the bank would decide that they would exercise their Parate right. So it is, from the banker's point of view, it is basically the last resort. And if you go through a sort of an age analysis, you'll find that a Parate execution takes place only if there's an immediate note of there is a willful default going to happen, or there's a fraud, or otherwise it would take a long period of negotiation, so much of restructuring, and that is the process. Of course, how that had an impact on the current economic crisis, the central bank obviously intervened, and there were grace periods given. And that has the last 2 years, starting from the COVID period and the economic crisis, there have been grace periods extended. And during this period, also opportunities given for banks and the SMEs or the borrowers to negotiate what are the possible ways that you could restructure the business and come out of it. There are certain businesses who have taken advantage of it and been able to manage their businesses and come out of it. Whereas, I mean, okay, the 80-20 rule will always apply. You'll get the 20 that is going above the the average and who are able to do that. But then the rest is basically a story of survival, and they are the ones who are facing the problem, because I mean, you get hit with a crisis like this, you certainly have a problem. And the worst part is that now when the Parate, okay, the grace period, all that is over, they have to restructure their business, or they have to do their business not just to make the profits that they need to survive or to provide the necessary income levels, but also to service whatever the interest that had accumulated during that grace periods. So it's I would say, an extraordinary effort that they have to do in planning their restructuring of the business. So it is now a question on how it is going to affect the SME sector. Now that it comes June, I think the extension was up till end of June, but there again up to loans of 25 million, it has been extended up to December. So it is the large loans that now banks probably are given the liberty to exercise their Parate rights and go ahead.
So when you say exercise the Parate rights, what does that mean? Now usually when a business takes a loan, there is something mortgaged. So
Exactly.
It's very often a person's land, for example.
It's basically immobile land, immobile property.
Yes. So this could be acquired by the bank.
Exactly.
But what if the person is living on that land? It's his house. What happens then? Because you're talking about if that is acquired, then that person has to vacate, essentially becomes homeless, and that could be a family. So are there special circumstances?
Definitely, because if for one thing is banks are very, very careful in taking your residential property. Banks generally avoid it because they also have their own risk management systems. So, but at the same time, it's not that it is not uncommon that you also would take your residential property as a collateral. So in such cases, of course, the bank, as I said, would give. In all cases, they would give the maximum benefit for you to come out with your plans, maybe even sometimes giving you concessions to repay. And to my knowledge, usually, unless it's seen that there is no way out, a bank would not go for that. So, on the other hand, banks are also bound to protect their depositors, because when they lend, they are lending other people's money. So, naturally, they would want to make sure that the ultimate situation is that they recover at least the full or some part of their money, so that they do not, they are accountable to their depositors. But as you say, that question is there, and it is also, it's a two-way thing, because as much as the banks exercising the Parate right, it is also something that has to be taken into consideration by the borrower himself when they are using their personal property or their residential property as a collateral. I know many prudent SMEs, they are very careful of it. They don't take that risk of pledging their residential property for their business, knowing very well the risk, unless they are certain and they are sure that they can manage the risk. So it's a two-way
right thinking. But this only applies to properties which have been mortgaged on that loan, is it?
Exactly.
It's not, say if a person has two houses.
If it is not mortgage, there is a different course of action that goes on the legal process, where you have to. There is a legal process that you go through where the court decides that okay, you need to settle the bank, and these are your assets, and the bank is given the right to go for those assets and recover. But that is a different process which is totally not connected to the Parate. Parate is where you straight away go and mortgage your property for that particular credit facility you obtain.
Right. Now, given the fact that this is such an important sector, shouldn't there be a better national discourse, a discussion on this? Because right now we seem to see the SMEs and their representatives are quite vociferous, saying that they need help. On the other side, the banks, also being profit-making institutions, they have their duty towards their shareholders. But I get this feeling that the government, the state, has not taken enough cognizance of this, because in the end, if you have a significant portion of the SME sector collapsing, we're all in trouble again, aren't we? And it's like saying, let's safeguard tourism. Don't, nobody should mess around. Don't have any, there was this threat a few months ago about possible attack in Arugambe, and everyone reacted very sharply, because we can't afford things like that to happen, even the very talk of a threat. So the government needs to safeguard every aspect of the economy, and I get the feeling that the discourse hasn't been enough, the public discourse on it, not just political promises. I mean, politicians make promises, but this is a national issue. What are your views on this? Should there be more discussion, public discussion, and so on?
Definitely, there should be more public discussion, because end of the day, coming out of this national problem, as much as the government, even the public, and as well as the in general, the whole public also should be supportive. So it should be a two-way dialogue, where number one, of course, the government will have to develop plans, and it is natural that the public want quick action. They want to see changes happening fast. They think that, the moment that a government changes or a government takes over, that they could just recover the economy or turn around the economy just like that. But there will be a process. So this process has to be properly, educated to the public, and definitely there should be at a national level, there has to be some more discussion than what is happening now, with more transparency on exactly what has to be done, rather than, trying to justify your economic, if you made any political promises. I mean, I'm making this as a neutral statement, which is happening with almost most governments. So they have to have a proper national plan that you have to involve all sectors, including SMEs, the corporates, the public, and there has to be a dialogue where the public is also convinced that there is something genuine being done, and that they have to have patience, and they may have to take some, tightening of belts, but there again, you have to make sure that they all feel also the process is fair and not unfair to some segments, but beneficial to some segments. So these aspects are going to be there in the whole governance process. Yes, so on that aspect, I think there is a lot more to be done.
Right.
Definite.
Right. And last week we had a special guest in Sri Lanka, a former President of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, yes, and he had many words of wisdom, to which we at Newsfirst listened very carefully, and we gave all his speeches wide publicity indeed, because our policymakers need to listen to a statesman of that caliber, especially because South Africa is a wonderful case study in how they came through with, they had an economic disaster as well, at the time of apartheid, and how they came through with a new constitution and the inclusiveness and so on. And one of the key points that struck me especially was he repeatedly said that the government needs to listen to the people, to go out there, to be among the people, to explain the government's objectives and programs, yes, but also to listen to the points of view of the people and understand the people, because you don't want a disconnect between the public and their requirements and the government, which often happens. And especially in Sri Lanka, it happens way too often, and it results in, at the end of 5 years, a government will be thrown out of power, and they're scratching their heads wondering what happened. And in the case of the Gotabaya Rajapaksa regime, they got thrown out of power in 2.5 years, and they're still wondering what happened. So my point here is that do you subscribe to this view that policymakers need to be more receptive to the views of all stakeholders?
I mean, it comes back to the point I raised earlier, that there should be dialogue between all parties if you have to understand the problem. And a part of the process obviously has to be listening and getting a feedback from all segments, including, in this particular focus, we're talking about SME. Yes, there should be a hearing to understand exactly what is going there and what are the exact problems. I mean, if you relate it to South Africa, in some extent, I would say South Africa, of course, they had resources. So maybe Sri Lanka also has resources, but are we really looking at how best we use those resources? Are we looking at prioritizing? Because, okay, in a complex situation, you may have to get your priorities right. So this is where probably the government and all stakeholders will have to come to a proper dialogue, listen what's going on and understand what are your priorities. The same applies with the public also. Okay, end of the day, we can talk or we can give our opinions, but the fact remains, okay, we have to service external debt that we have. I mean, for some whoever is blame, you can always do the blaming game, but the fact remains that you have to face the problem. So there, how do we prioritize the way we are running our economy? Which segments should we support? What are the segments that are really contributing to the economy, and are we taking enough effort to support those segments? Are we giving enough support for exporters? Foreign currency flow is so important. Are we doing enough to help the exporters in the best fit of using our resources? Are we doing enough to make our economy attractive for foreign direct investments? So these are all a part of the discussions where you might have to go into some sort of steps that you decide, okay, these are going to be our national priorities, and we all agree on this. Okay, if there's a disagreement, then you need to have a marketing plan on how you sell your concepts to the public. So that's where you will have to also have a cross dialogue and listen to. So that is my basic take on it.
Absolutely. We need to take a short break now. I'm in conversation with Delvin Pereira, District Governor, Rotary Sri Lanka and Maldives, and we are speaking about the economy and the SME sector, which Rotary is now supporting. Don't go away. We'll be right back after this break.
Sirasa Dancing Star. The preliminary round selection test will be held on premises. July 6th at 9 a.m. at Carter's Golf said premises. July 8th at 9 a.m. at Ratmalana Stein Studio Complex. If you are an excellent dancer, come to the nearest venue with your dance group and showcase your talent. A.m. at YMBA Hall, Kandy. July 2nd at 9 a.m. at the Anuradhapura Municipal Council No. 2 Community Hall. July 3rd at 9 a.m. at the Veerasingham Hall, Jaffna. If you are an excellent dancer, come to the nearest venue with your dance group and showcase your talent.
Welcome back to Face to Face. I am in conversation with Delvin Pereira, a banker of 37 years and the District Governor of Rotary Sri Lanka and Maldives. Delvin, now when Sri Lanka, our economy collapsed, we reached out to the IMF, which is a global organization, and then of course once that process started, we got help from the World Bank, the ADB, and also bilateral help from governments like India and so on. But beyond all that, there are organizations like Rotary which can help through other means, not by, you're not a lending institution, but you're a networking institution. How can organizations like Rotary International and all the other networking and social institutions, organizations, how can they help Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka's entrepreneurs in particular?
Yeah, I mean, there is huge opportunity, as you rightly said. They are not an organization that would directly come in as, bring in for direct FDIs. But there are opportunities that we can make use. I would put it in two angles. One is, of course, coming back to the SME support that we are talking about. Now, Rotary has a huge support arm known as the Rotary Foundation. This foundation is funded by the Rotary members globally themselves, where they contribute to the foundation. And what the foundation do is they direct funding to places that there's a humanitarian need. So one aspect of it is the training aspect, of capacity building aspect when it comes to community and economic development, where we could seek assistance, particularly if we identify a segment where we feel that there is a training that we can give them for capacity building, and such training is going to definitely produce some economic benefit to the country or to your community. Then that is one of the sources that is available in the Rotary. In addition to that, as you rightly said, Rotary is a networking organization. So you get, I mentioned we have around 2,200 plus Rotarians who are networking with each other for many reasons, business being one. And they are networking with the international community, because once you become a Rotarian, you are a part of that global community of 1.4 billion members. So it gives you opportunity to build up partnerships, and through those partnerships, if you have opportunity, you could attract them to come in and invest in Sri Lanka. That is one of the scopes available on how such networking organizations could help. One best example is, as I mentioned earlier, within Rotary, we have this fellowship group called Rotary for Business. So what this group really does is that they explore possibilities of how they could promote business with each other. And one of the tasks they undertake is visiting these countries with a business delegate from here. We recently had a delegate to Chennai, where we were given a total presentation on how we could do business with getting counterparts from India, which is, I think, a huge opportunity we got. The way the Indian economy is developing, that's one angle that you could attract, build up partnerships, get them to come and set up partnerships in Sri Lanka, where they could help us to use our resources more efficiently. So there is certainly scope for organizations like Rotary, through its networking, to help our economy looking at those angles.
Right. Now, a lot depends on how Sri Lanka fixes its own issues, because it's not simply a question of we took wrong decisions and the economy collapsed. Now, when we're trying to get out of this, we know we need FDI, foreign direct investment. But what we hear from investors, foreign and local, is that Sri Lanka is so unattractive when it comes to investment, because we have willfully neglected so many aspects, so many factors that any investor will consider. What should be the government's focus in trying to fix these issues?
Yeah, one is, of course, it has been long been discussed and criticized. The process of getting involved or doing business in Sri Lanka index, we are one of the, we are in the bottom line. In the past, we have had instances of the amount of corruption that is involved in, setting up a business which basically, chase away investors coming in. Well, we see that there are certain steps taken to some extent to get those things ironed out or controlled and build up some favorable reputation, but still a lot to be done. We have to, improve our whole, the process of the ways to do business, improving our index on the ease of doing business in Sri Lanka definitely has to be improved. That is number one. Then of course the country rating itself, because most investors are going to look at the country rating when they come to invest.
The sovereign rating.
The sovereign rating.
Yes.
So this is where sometimes, because, an investor looking here is going to check on, a bank going to deal with us is going to check on the bank's rating, which is subordinate to the sovereign rating of the country. So, okay, you cannot overnight change, but you can gradually improve, or you can make sure that you direct all your policies in a way that your country's sovereign rating is going to improve. But at the same time, individuals building up networking should be able to convince. For an example, we have several Rotary businessmen who individually are able to directly, through their networking, invite them, show them what is happening here, and woo investment to come in. So I think in a situation like that, that would be one way of attracting tourists, attracting foreign investment, is your individual capacity to negotiate and network and get in business. So again, coming to your earlier question, an organization like Rotary definitely would, through its networking arm, would be able to have its individual members striking partnerships, if they have the right support here, to make our business process of doing business here attractive and look easy.
Now, there's a lot of discussion on matters like this, especially on programs like this one. We discuss this ease of doing business and so on. We identify these are the factors and so on. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of effort on the ground. There's a lot of talk, but on the ground you don't see a lot happening. Now with corruption, of course, we do see the Bribery Commission has been energized. It's been given a lot more resources, and things are happening with that. So with corruption, hopefully, in the near term, we will see some results. But that's just one factor. And that's a relatively easy factor, when you think of business. I'm not saying it's easy to wipe out corruption, but to create
it's a simple thing. Okay, you take out corruption, your problem is solved there. But
so what about the other factors? Are we actually addressing them, or just simply talking about them?
A difficult question to ask, but I think it's a little bit too premature. I wonder, maybe we'll have to give some time to see, because we are talking, also we are seeing something. Maybe the process of it happening is not as fast as what we are talking, but then we see something's happening. So of course, with how long we could wait is a matter of time. But maybe I think we also might, to be fair, we might have to give some sort of have some patience in seeing how these things improve. But to what extent and how long is the indefinite question.
Yes, because if we are in 2 years' time, if we are still talking about the same thing,
it's not going to help. We need to come out it fast.
Exactly, because
so it comes back to the same point we raised on the issues that we have to prioritize, and I think this is one issue that you have to prioritize. And I haven't gone through the process, but we have to have some separate government action group looking at this whole process and having some high power, the power to take necessary steps, actions to put things corrected. So it should be a group or an arm that is given a lot of powers to do those sweeping changes.
Right. Now, as a veteran banker, give me a bank's perspective on the view of the economy, the view of Sri Lanka as a whole, because 3 years ago, let's say 2022, everything had collapsed, and it was we were wondering what would happen. We had millions of people out in the street, so we knew the government was collapsing, but we didn't know what would replace it. There were a lot of issues, and banks were afraid for their capital. I mean, what would happen to the banks themselves? But the situation now is it much different? How do the banks view Sri Lanka's economy?
There is a silver lining in the way banks are looking. Like, okay, you're absolutely right when you said maybe 1 year or 2 years back, banks are very skeptical. Although you have to be in business, also banks are very skeptical on the risks they took, particularly on the lending, and also the demand for credit was more for. I mean, I would say the demand for credit was more on structuring your business than investing for expansion. So now we see a lot of businesses looking at that angle, taking some positive approach in expanding those businesses. But of course, yet we have to see the. As it was expected, people are now feeling the pinch of their ability to spend. Maybe immediately, if something that even we were surprised that if you look 1 year ago, suddenly we saw people feeling very comfortable to spend. The moment there's a government change, we found that the hotels were full, people were going spending. But now we find that suddenly people are the public is facing the reality, and they are more careful in where they spend and how they spend. So this is so it has to be a whole process. I mean, businesses have to grow if the income levels are to roll, and it's only if the income is generated that people are going to spend. So it's a circle that has to happen. But banks are to the question that you asked. Yes, if you see 1 year ago and now, banks are more focused on supporting or looking at their book growth in lending, and they're seeing opportunities and prospects of growing credit and supporting businesses, and they see that and also with certain steps taken by even the government, the central bank, keeping the interest rate stabilized at a single digit, which to some extent control the cost of borrowing. So these are some of the positive aspects that we could see for the future. Only problem is we are still not certain. I see that most banks are not certain of the long-term view. Maybe they're looking at it a little bit more short-term. But if you're having to invest for something for 10 years or 5 years, well, there would be still some sort of skepticism there. But to provide necessary working capital financing or short-term financing, allow businesses to recover and start doing their business, there is some more positive outlook than it was 1 year back.
Right. And also, 3 years ago, when our sovereign rating basically went down to the lowest, it became nearly impossible for Sri Lankan banks to work internationally. So, just because foreign banks would simply say, well, we can't put any trust in any faith in you because of your country rating. Simple things like opening an LC to import something.
You needed confirmation of foreign bank to confirm your LC, which was costly.
Exactly.
And it automatically put up the costs of imports.
Yes. And a lot of it has to do with, of course, our sovereign rating, which is Fitch, Moody's, S&P. They rate countries continuously. Now, we saw a slight improvement in the ratings at the end of last year, but since then we haven't seen any improvement. Does this have a huge impact, or is it more on a case-by-case basis that banks are able to deal with foreign partners?
It does have a huge impact because, well, end of the day, your cost, you're keeping your cost. We discussed that SMEs, one of the major problems is they are not being competitive in their costs with the when you look at other markets or foreign markets. And the cost of financial, okay, you can keep your interest rate down, but still, as you rightly said, if the bank's rating, the bank's external rating is low, or because of, say, high NPLs, for an example. That's why banks are trying to bring down their non-performing assets low, because that is a decisive factor on their, credit rating. And along with that, again, even the bank's rating is again subordinate to the national rating when it comes to doing international business as well as banks. So definitely banks would have problems in negotiating their ability to negotiate viable sort of cheap or low cost financial lines is to a great extent. There is an hindrance. So that is why banks are not able to get external funds. There was a time that banks were able to negotiate credit lines that came in at very low costs. We still do get some support from banks like from the ADB on supporting the country, but that ability for banks on their own strength to negotiate for external credit lines is to a great extent affected by the fact that you are still subordinate to the sovereign rating, and most foreign lending agencies would be skeptical in giving favorable terms. I mean, they would always rate you as a high risk, and they would always add a premium, which is not going to make the cost of funds cheap.
Right. So if and when our sovereign rating improves, our banks will be cheering.
It's going to have a impact overall. Now, sovereign rating improving. I mean, it's again all connected, because sovereign rating improving means businesses have to improve, the economy has to improve, the foreign funds have to flow in. So it's a whole machinery that has to work to and sync together for it to happen. So we all hope and we all support and we all looking to see that we can get this whole thing working together and support. And end of the day, maybe every year when we review that, we see an improvement of sovereign rating. And you see, when the trend of the sovereign rating is improving, that also is a favorable factor, because you are for a foreign investor, they see that there is a trend of an improvement. So therefore, the forecast will always be good.
Right. And is there any common vision of the banks, the banking sector, where our different industries are concerned, where banks would be more favorable in supporting, let's say, tourism, the hotel industry, or IT versus, say, traditional factory-based, that kind of thing. What I'm trying to get at is, what should Sri Lanka be focusing on in terms of which industry? Which the banks, of course, see the financial results of their borrowers. So yes, banks would understand it much better as to which would be the best type of investment.
It's right now one of the issues that banks have is too early, because we have gone through and we are just recovering with the what we see. The results are necessarily a reflection of the long-term scope is something that the banks will be a little bit skeptical. But for definite, we know that tourism, one of the biggest problems that we have is attracting foreign investment or attracting foreign currency. So that's where everybody would see right now as the most, the industry that is easy to predict of growth is tourism. But the question is, there again, you need to invest, you need to get there has to be enough done to market ourselves. Whether that is being done is again another question mark. But yes, there should be a national policy and approach on how we are selling ourselves as a tourist destination, because still, if we look at some of the other competitors, we have, although there are improvement, whether we are in line with the market or are we competitive enough is something that we need to look at. Now, that's one area that Rotary, I could say that Rotary has been doing its share of contribution, because over the last 6 months, I know we would have had at least 2,000 Rotarians coming to conduct their programs, because they see Sri Lanka as a cheaper destination and also as infrastructurally having the necessary facilities to conduct their conferences and also mix tourism with pleasure.
Right. So you're talking about 2,000 foreign Rotarians coming in. Then next year we are having a big event which we have been able to attract it to be shifted from India to Sri Lanka, where they need about 500 to 600 rooms for a 4-day event, where we expect about nearly 2,000 foreign Rotarians to visit for this event. So Rotary has on its part. And personally, as a governor, I network with many of my co-governors overseas. So we have been promoting them to come and promote our tourism, come and have their programs here. And
to a certain extent, we have been able to get them attractive packages where they have found Sri Lanka cost-wise a cheap place to come and conduct their programs. So there should be more of this happening and more infrastructure development also happening so that we can really bank on this. So the only problem is that, well, the banks also, they have lent a lot to this industry and they are still to recover from those. So on top of that, making whether you would straight away go outright to finance this industry is something that there is some question mark. But as from industry attractiveness, definitely it's an industry that we should be banking on.
Excellent. And I'm afraid we are out of time. Thank you very much to my guest this evening, Delvin Pereira, veteran banker and district governor, Rotary Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Nilesh. It was certainly a pleasure having this discussion with you.
Right, and thank you to you at home for watching. Don't go away because the news is coming up next. Have a great evening.